All right, well, I'll start by introducing people. We can get our introductions out of the way while people trickle in. So welcome everyone to the first session after that introduction. This is interactive exercises empowering sustainable thinking, solving wicked problems across the curriculum. And I will let our two presenters introduce themselves. And you all tell me, John and Alexi, I usually do kind of like a 10-minute warning and then a 5-minute warning. Is that useful? Or you've got your time masters, or what's useful for me?
I was hoping you could have the orchestra music play like they do at the Oscars, so that
It's
we'll
just
know
like slowly
it
fade
just gets
out
louder and louder.
Okay,
Yeah,
perfect.
10 minutes and 5 minutes will be great.
Okay, perfect. Then I'll give you a little warning with that. And with no further ado, take it away.
All right, I'll introduce myself. I'm Alexi Lamm. I'm the Sustainability Coordinator at USU, and I am located in Facilities Planning and Design. And I'll let John introduce himself.
Hi, I'm John Ferguson. I'm Senior Lecturer in the Business School. I teach business law, international business law, and several other things. I'm also on the Sustainability Council with Alexi. And for good or bad, I'm also president-elect of Faculty Senate. So I don't know if that's, people keep congratulating me, and I'm not sure if it's congratulations or condolences that we're really looking for there, but we're awful glad you're all here today.
Yeah, so as we are both on the Planetary Thinking and the Curriculum Committee at USU as part of the Sustainability Council. And the committee works to ensure students at USU experience or understand sustainability, encountering it once or more than once throughout their time at USU. So we began organizing trainings for faculty in 2015, and there will be another one this spring. So if you're interested in that, you can stay in contact with us. And today, let's see, I guess I should pull up the presentation. All right, is that coming through for people? Okay, so today we're focused on giving you resources sorry, I have monitor issues. We're focused on giving you resources for interactive exercises that you can adapt to your class, whether you're focused on sustainability like I am, or business law like John is, or whatever it is that you're focused on in your classroom. We're hoping that we'll be able to give you some flexible exercises that maybe you could adapt to your teaching. So we'll start with a brief review of wicked problems. And then we'll discuss activity and do an activity, discuss it, and then go through some other resources that we've compiled for you. And then finally, we'll open it up to share like what you've done and what works for you and any questions people might have. So to get started with our wicked problem review, environmental sustainability is just one category of wicked problems. We're talking about them today because sustainability isn't just one thing, right? It affects human health through water quality, microplastics, endocrine disruptors. It affects air quality, public safety, water levels in our reservoirs and that affects the water that is actually available for our food systems. So these issues are all connected, right? And these are just a few examples from research that's been done at USU that's been in the news. And they affect students, right, who are studying agriculture, economics, or political science, or outdoor product design, forestry, sociology, whatever it is. These problems are going to be things that students are going to be encountering throughout their education, hopefully, and then definitely throughout their lives and in their careers.
And one of the reasons that we're picking this particular area, when it comes to wicked problems, we know they've done a lot of research and polling, especially with college students that are coming in this year and will be coming in the next few years. There is a real concern in many of these kind of bigger, broader issues. They're not necessarily as focused as narrowly as they once were. Many of our students are dealing with much more of an existential crisis in these issues. So whether it's social justice issues, whether it's, policing issues or racial issues, or a big one for many of our students is sustainability and environmental issues. One of the things that they've done some recent research, it was, oh, and I blanked on the name of the poll, but they did a poll where they looked at incoming students nationally, and they found that 75% of the students in the survey they did, how the university related to and how seriously they took sustainability, environmental issues, actually played a role in where they decided to go. And I mean, I don't know if it was necessarily the primary role, but it definitely played some part in where they decided to go, because these things are important to kids. Kind of following up on that, I know President Cockett has been saying in the past week or so that this is a big issue for a lot of our students. A lot of these bigger wicked issues are something that our students are really concerned about. As we look to this semester, as we look to, we're still in this COVID situation, we're dealing with students who are have had a lot of disruption in their lives over the last 2 years. And I mean, students always have disruption when they go off to college, but now that's been exacerbated. And so she's concerned, and the university overall is concerned, both for mental health reasons and other reasons, that we start responding to and helping students have some sort of toolbox for dealing with the existential dread many of them really are coming to college with. Many of them are coming in already overwhelmed, already feeling that there's too much for them to deal with. And so whatever we can do is we look at our curriculum and how we create and structure our curriculum to deal with some of those issues can really help assuage some of those concerns. And that's going to be an ongoing university-wide issue. And so we're hoping that as we talk about these wicked issues and these wicked problems, that we can start addressing and looking how whatever discipline we're in and whatever issues we deal with in our discipline can actually be extrapolated out into other areas. And I told Lexi I wasn't going to talk the whole time and go too long, but one other thing that we do know, for those of you who may be in education or have done a lot of educational theory and learning theory, we know that one of the kind of basic learning, I'm sorry, again, for those of you who didn't hear, I dropped my kid off at college yesterday, and so I'm dealing with the whole empty nest issue, and I think it's caused brain damage. I keep losing words. And so, but one of the things, one of the kind of foundational theories in learning is, if we want students to learn and we want them to retain the things they're learning, it's often much better if we put the learning concepts and the things we want them to learn into a broader context. If we teach students things in isolation, they tend to forget them very quickly. If we teach them, memorize this fact, they might be able to memorize it for a test or, to regurgitate it quickly, but they're not going to internalize it. Until they've learned about something and they learn about it from multiple perspectives and they have to use it in different contexts, they don't really make it part of their learning and kind of their intellectual life, which is really the core of what a university is supposed to be. We're not supposed to be teaching, we're not a trade school. We're not here to teach them one narrow thing. We're trying to create these well-balanced, interdisciplinary people who are going to go out into the world and confront problems from a multitude of perspectives, which leads us to our wicked problems. Lexi?
All right, yeah, so, right. Students are going to be encountering changing circumstances and complex problems where the knowledge they've learned at USU and in their fields is going to require creativity to apply to new issues. And those problems aren't going to be in silos or departments. They're going to have all of us pulling together perspectives from different disciplines and working with diverse stakeholders and audiences. So as a quick review, wicked problems may be impossible to comprehensively formulate. They tend to be tied to bigger problems and require more solutions as we go. So every problem might be a symptom of a different problem. So even as we try to formulate solutions, we could be just tugging on something that's even bigger than where we started. And how we define that problem is going to determine whether our solutions, like which solutions are better or worse, but nothing's going to be true or false or like the only solution. It's just going to depend on how we formulate the problem in the first place. And the consequences of those solutions could be far ranging in terms of the people they affect, the time frame we're looking at, and like the scope of the ripples that come out from those changes. And these are wicked problems, and they're in every field. And that's why we're talking about it in terms of across the curriculum. It's every field has their own wicked problems. So students need to be prepared for these. And as Ed and Co said, if they're going to solve wicked problems, we need to give them wicked competencies. So to prepare students, we need to teach them with high impact practices. And a lot of us already use these in our classrooms, trying to encourage students to connect these issues, to discover meaning, to synthesize information, respond to collaborators, understand feedback, or discuss, like create strategies, right, to overcome obstacles on the way. And so we use collaborative, projects, community engaged learning, research projects, and those are all good strategies. And since you're here, we assume you don't need too much convincing. So we're going to kind of wrap up our review of wicked problems. And for this session, we want to give you some tools to include wicked problem solving in your class, regardless of whether it's a standalone addition or something that complements an assignment or a project or something that's already present in your class. So we've compiled a resource list, and we'll have that posted later to the conference platform. And I'm going to turn it over to John now because we'd like to actually demonstrate one activity that he's used in his class.
Yeah, the activity we're going to talk about in just a minute, I originally was going to have us go through this as a group, but with the breakout room issue, it's not working quite right. So we may just talk through this, if that's okay with all of you. Plus, for time-wise, it may be easier for us to kind of talk through it as a group as we go through. Now, this particular exercise, I have to give due credit. I stole this exercise from Shannon Peterson. She and I used to run the old Huntsman Scholar program, and this was one of the activities we did with students because that particular program was very focused on interdisciplinary approaches to problems and interdisciplinary projects and activities. And so we had to learn, and we had to try and create ways of helping them start looking at problems beyond just their major and looking at it from different perspectives. So one of the ways we did that, and Alexi, could you click over to the next slide? All right. Yeah, one of the ways we do this is a project that was based on the idea of hold on one second. All right, we would focus on the issue of how do we come together and how do we resolve group problems when we have different people who have different interests, we have different groups of people who have different perspectives, and as we went into this was a game we would start off with. Now we gave them readings beforehand, and so we gave them readings about how we deal with the tragedy of the commons. In fact, we had them read Tragedy of the Commons. So we literally had them walk through, and these were honor students. These are some of the brightest students we have. We had them read these treatises on this problem and how people have gone about solving it and what the issues are, and then we had them play the game. And the game really is just a Tragedy of the Commons style game, which is there's a limited set of resources, and everyone is going to pull from that resource. If everyone pulls the maximum amount, you'll destroy the resource. So you've got to find some way, either you find a sustainable way of dealing with it, or ultimately everyone crashes. And there are different ways of formulating this. Sam, some days it could be toilet paper, but the way we'd go through this, like I say, there are different iterations of how we do this. There are different ways of kind of changing the rules. Sometimes the way I would often set it up is the first 2 or 3 rounds, you'd set students up in different teams. The teams aren't allowed to talk to each other. So they have to make decisions about this pool of resources without talking to each other. They can only talk amongst themselves and their team. And the way this works is the resource pool is 300 points. We go for 10 rounds, and every round, each team can either choose to pull 0, 5, 10, or 20 points. And they would put it on a piece of paper and they'd hand it up to me, and then we'd write them up on the board after everyone had turned them in. And then once we had all the numbers up on the board, we'd take that many out of the pool, and then we'd replenish the pool by 10%. And the way we do this is, after we'd gone through, if any time in those first 10 rounds, if the pool of resources fell below 100, then everyone loses. But we, and Alexi, if we go to the next slide, we do create incentives. So whichever team has the most points gets the A, and whichever team has the least points gets the C, or 10 points or 20, however you want to set it up. And if everyone dies, everyone fails. Now, all of these obviously are artificial. The grades don't really matter, and I've done this a number of ways. Sometimes we say, yes, there's a grade associated with it. Sometimes we just say there's points. But even in classroom situations where the points don't actually tie into anything, I'll even say, these aren't necessarily going to be your grade points, but here are the points you get. Even that very limited and pointless thing I set up, it's like that TV show, Whose Line Is It Anyway, where they're just awarding points and the points don't matter. But it does matter to students for whatever reason. And even in situations where they know the points don't matter, so the incentives are even very, very small, or very large in some cases if I do actually tie it to a grade, and they've been given the resources, they know what the problem is, they know how people have dealt with the problem, we still have students who, most of the time, I will say at least 60% of the time, it comes down to everyone dying, surprisingly enough. And like I said, there are different ways you can set this up. If you set it up for the first few rounds, students aren't allowed to talk to each other, so they have to do things internally. Then later, they're allowed to talk to each other in later rounds before they turn in their paper. In some cases, I will set it up where the 5th round and the 10th round, whatever points you get doubled, or there's lots of ways you can figure it out. But ultimately, the surprising part is, once students get into that kind of competitive mindset of, okay, I'm not going to look at the resources I have, and even though I know, ways of solving this, I know what the research shows, or things that I can do or that are effective to do, we still end up with failures. And the best part of this is when we get to the point of the debrief and we talk it out. All right, so what happened? There was this many resources, and you knew that everyone was going to fail, or there would be, nuclear war or environmental catastrophe, or however you wanted to set it up. Why did we still end up this way? And the responses from students really became interesting over the years as I do this, because students came to this from very different perspectives. You had some students who were just basic, kind of immediate incentive driven. So I want the most points, I want to win, I want the grade, I want whatever. And so those people, it's like they didn't really care, they just wanted to win no matter what. And the results they got from that really affected everyone else in the group. And there was a learning process, not only for the student who just wanted everything for themselves, but all the students who had to work with that person. Because they began to realize, okay, this person is very, just self-motivated, and they don't care about the rest of the group. How should we deal with them differently in the future? There were a lot of issues where some students were like, well, we came to an agreement during the rounds where we could talk together, and then you violated the agreement. You said you were only going to take 5 and you took 20 points instead, and then we felt that you violated that. You've got some students who will go through and they'll take kind of a financial approach or a mathematical approach, and they'll actually work out, okay, here's the maximum amount we can each take out, and we'll share rounds, and we'll come up with these kind of advanced systems. And then we talk about why those did or didn't work. So it can be a really useful framework or skeleton. And the reason I like this, and the reason Alexi and I wanted to share this with everyone, is because it's really more of a skeleton exercise. You can pack on whatever you want or need that fits best with your course. You can make this fit into dealing with issues related to biology. You can do this when you're dealing with issues related to economics, or to whatever discipline you're dealing with. you can tweak this and modify it to make it effective to meet the needs of your particular group. So that's the exercise, and it seems pretty simple. I will say students, well, two responses to this I will say from students. One, students tend to really like this. They always like games. They always like stuff we can do in class, especially where they get to have some sense of competition. But on the other hand, I will also caution, this has caused some real disruption among groups. I've had some situations where we got done with this, and when it was all done, there were some students who weren't talking to each other. Like, we had to have some debriefing afterwards to make sure people didn't hate each other at the end of it, because someone felt that somebody else had betrayed them and they'd agreed to things, and emotions do get high. So you do have to manage this, even though it seems like a rather simple and ridiculous exercise that may not even have anything, a relevant incentive to it. But they're students, and college students do tend to approach these things from a more emotional place and response. So what we want to do now, though, is, given this framework and given this kind of basic structure to this game, we want to open it up to you all and kind of get your perspectives. Are there ways you see that this could be helpful in your particular classes, classes you're teaching? And in what ways do you think it would be most helpful? Because we found, when talking about this and doing these kind of sessions with other people, the more you can talk about your perspective, the more you might trigger things with other people who maybe aren't even in your discipline, but they are, you may trigger something that makes them think, oh, that might be really useful over here in the things I'm dealing with. So we kind of want to open that up to you now. What are your thoughts, and do you think this is something that would be helpful in your area? And if so, in what way? Wow, this is a lot like being in class with Zoom. It's just, I'm having flashbacks or PTSD. One.
Hi. I've used an exercise like this before in English class when we were talking about the difference between competition and collaboration. Just pretty basic definitions. And it really does matter how you set up the scenario at the beginning. But I think that it becomes even more necessary now. So we used it as we were getting ready to write a proposal. And so we were dealing with land use issues, which are always a big issue in the West. And so they had to come up with solutions that might not be perfect for everybody, but everybody in the group was satisfied with. So we did this exercise before they started working on those papers.
All right, good. And did you find, as they were dealing with competition or collaboration, did they tend more towards one way or another?
Well, again, it always depends on the students. There are always a few students who are just really self-motivated and individualistic and just really grab everything they can. And then there are some groups that are really altruistic and trying to negotiate with all of the other groups nearby and try and give away their points to other people sometimes. So that was interesting.
All right, interesting. And from an English perspective, I hadn't even thought about using this in an English class. That's great. All right, anybody else? Thoughts? I really do. Before classes start, I'm going to get one of those cricket sounds that I can play.
I have a question. When you're talking about the different levels of altruism that students have, do you think that kind of attitude differs from major to major? Because there are some very rubber hits the road majors and some that are more creative and where you're looking at different perspectives for people. I taught for the English department for a long time, and so I had a wide variety of students, and it was really interesting to see what you could glean about majors and what they're being taught in their other programs.
I do think it matters a great deal about what where the students are coming from. As was said, the types of students matter. The one thing I do know is that in when we were doing this with the Old Huntsman Scholars, almost all of them had dual majors. They'd have a major in the business school, and then we really encouraged them to have a major somewhere else in the university. So a lot of them had majors from various areas, and so my view is skewed. I don't say these are purely coming from different majors, but those who came from certain schools and certain disciplines as their second major, they definitely tended to be more, like you said, collaborative, more wanting to find group solutions. There are others who came from other disciplines, and I'm not going to say which disciplines because I don't want people to get mad or say that I'm painting with too big a brush here. But certain other disciplines were definitely much more focused. I will say that the disciplines that tended to be more focused on specific tasks, so task-driven majors or majors that had, I don't want to say right and wrong answers, but definitely there were more oftentimes viewed as objective type of majors versus the philosophical or, let's think big picture kind of stuff. They had very different perspectives on this and how they responded. And I do know within the business school, the majors I deal with most often, I can tell you the accounting and finance majors had a very different approach to how they came to this than the marketing and management majors. And kind of the loggerheads they would sometimes run into because, and again, I hope this is helpful in the various disciplines you're in, but one of the things that I think was really helpful to a lot of them was when they'd come together and these people who were in disciplines who'd been taught, okay, you have to go get yours and you're very much have to be self-reliant, no one else is going to help you. They had to deal with people who are like, no, we'll have a better result if we all come together. And the things they learned from one another and having to work with people who were from those different perspectives. One of the problems we often have, and we're realizing this more and more as we deal with connections and in other areas of the school, as we look holistically, is so often students get siloed in their discipline, and despite the fact that they need to have gen ed and they're supposed to be, learning more broadly and interdisciplinarily in these gen ed courses, they don't take their gen ed courses very seriously. They just focus on what's in my major, what's the thing that's going to get me a job, what's the thing that, I have to focus on to get out quickly, all those sorts of things. They tend to get in those echo chambers that we all tend to get into. And despite the fact that the university is structured in such a way that we want to avoid those things, it's just human nature. They keep going back to it. Things like this, dealing with wicked problems, requires us to get outside of our bubbles. It requires us to get outside of our just our discipline. And so we have to talk to people and we have to work with people who are different from us and have different perspectives. And in my mind, and again, I'm a bit of an idealist, but I truly believe that's what a university education is all about. And if we don't do that, if that's not the core of what we're doing, then we're charging these kids way too much money. They can go to a tech school, they can get out fast, and they can do it for a lot less money. If we're not doing the value add of actually creating interdisciplinary global thinkers who are going to go out in the world and solve these wicked problems, we may be a little bit fraudulent, and maybe we need to reevaluate the choices we're making. So, oh wait, we're recording this. I mean, no, I take that back. I didn't mean anything I just said. Everything's great. We're all fine. Gotta remember
well,
that.
John, you hit a note with me, so I unmuted myself. Wicked problems is something that we in outdoor product design and development have to cover extensively because we're in the business, or we're shoving our students into the business of making more things for the outdoors. And many of our students have this idea of like, we're going to save the world and everything's going to be sustainable and we're going to not use plastics in anything. And we're going to go out into the wilderness and we're going to enjoy and everyone's going to keep it pristine. And in reality, that's not exactly what happens. So for part of my dissertation, I took a collaborative multimodal approach and we combined multiple disciplines. We did landscape architecture, outdoor product design and development, and rec management and some natural resources. And we came up with a curriculum where we took students down to Moab, and we touched on all of these different problems facing the Four Corners area and these gateway communities. And our students were mostly outdoor product students. And they're like, wait, we're making things for people to go to these pristine areas, and then they're messing up these areas. And so how do we solve this problem? And it came down to collaboration, and it came down to, you know, coming outside of your comfort zone, exactly what you were saying. And they couldn't necessarily come up with something that was going to solve the overall issue, but maybe put a Band-Aid on it for a little while until they learned a little bit more or talked to the right people to kind of keep going. Because wicked problems are really intense, and I don't necessarily know if well, I do know they can't be solved in isolation. They can't. And if you try to solve it in isolation, you're not going to get anywhere with them. You're just going to cause more issues that have to be fixed by somebody else that comes up against them. So I think one of the major pitfalls, like you guys were saying, is that we get stuck in our own little areas, our own programs, and we got to get through the curriculum, and we have to do what we have to do to make sure our students have the competency to move on to the next class or graduate or get a job or do whatever they need to do, instead of allowing them to reach over and, you know, go talk to the business school, go talk to natural resources, go see what they're doing over in landscape architecture, and make those connections. Because in real life, at least what I've noticed in my professional life, is that if I don't communicate and collaborate with people other than what I know, I'm not getting anything substantial done. So I'm just there nodding my head like, yep, that's correct. You're right. You can be on that soapbox, and I'm right there next to you.
Yeah, Julie, you're right on. And we've seen over and over again with the kind of Facebook problem where everyone just listens and talks to themselves in these kind of echo chambers we create. We see these problems happening over. I will say, and this is really more towards me, you all probably have already realized this, but it astounds me every semester where I think I've come upon something amazing, like these are wicked problems and students need to be, you know, taught in an interdisciplinary manner. And the students are all like, yeah, we kind of know that. Like, it's not the students who are surprised by this. It's often I'm the one who's surprised by this. And so part of this process is just reminding myself, because when they get here, they kind of know the world is big. They don't know how big, but they know it's bigger than them, and they know they need different things. We spend about 4 years trying to beat that out of them and trying to put them into those silos, because that's really much more efficient for us. And again, I'll get a little preachy here, but I think it's incumbent upon us, part of our fiduciary responsibility as faculty, to make sure we retain that knowledge that these students may already be coming in with, that they do need this variety. They do need this broader perspective. Now, we need to move on because I want Alexi to have time. She's going to show some of the other resources, some other ideas for some games and other activities. Again, all these will be in the resource section, so you'll be able to download these and have access to these. But here are some other ideas of things that are out there. Like I said, we were going to run through this and use a breakout room. That didn't quite work, so we didn't practice this one in real time, but I think you all know. Sam, do I have 10 minutes or are you doing jazzy hands? I'm not entirely sure if we're...
A jazzy 10 minutes left.
I kind of wish we had jazzy hands. I think that's even better. And then also, Alexi and I want to talk a little bit at the end about we have a conference coming up, and for ETE, you can get badges, and it can move you towards your progression if you attend this conference. So we want to tell you a little about that. Alexi?
Okay, let's see. So I'm going to run through just a few other things. And again, these will be in like a resources document that we'll post. But so games like we're going to just play, get students involved, and they're memorable. So there's a systems thinking playbook for climate change, but there's also different versions of this, and they have a lot of shorter exercises that fit well into a class. Like a lot of them could happen within one class period. But of course, others are more involved. One I've used in a class is a stabilization wedges game, and it's about trying to strategize about which ways of cutting carbon emissions or producing renewable energy would get us to a goal of meeting, let's say, a 2C or 1.5 C temperature increase, keeping it to that level and not higher. And it's been really helpful for students to have to think through it, because in the game, you have to think about like the space and the cost, and having students think through like, what would it take to double fuel efficiency on cars? Or what if we installed solar panels, and in the game, each of these wedges is worth a certain amount of carbon. And so you're trying to get 8 wedges to get us to our goal by 2055. And for example, one of those wedges would be of solar panels would be thousands of square kilometers of solar panels, like the size of New Jersey, or like one wedge of wind turbines is like the size of Germany. And just getting people to think about it on that scale helps people think through like, these are, problems that we're going to have to work with a lot of different people. They're going to affect a lot of people, and trying to think through the complexity of the solutions. So these are a few examples of games. We have others that'll be in the resources. And then mapping it out is also another strategy that is frequently used to help people with systems thinking, to try to think about a problem from a lot of different directions, whether it's mapping how to make a piece of toast, or thinking about an entire food system and where that comes and where it goes, and what are the inputs and where the outputs go. And you can take those a step further, like pushing mapping into other projects. So this is another example of practicing just other perspectives, starting with mapping it out. In this particular project, the idea is to come up with a perspective from the future, from 2050, looking back on, let's say, the economic system of now. In this case, it's the linear economy. And these students worked with policymakers to try to think of how people of the future are going to be looking back. And then they needed to come up with an event that they thought might happen between now and then that would spur a change. So it requires kind of looking back and looking forward, and then came up with a museum object that people of the future would think was relevant to the linear economy from a different perspective. So whether it's a different time or a different culture or a different like audience for a message, just trying to have students think through that about how would people can look at this differently from a different discipline, for example. And you can also flip it, where students are guessing a perspective. And this could even be on a test or just a thought experiment, where you can provide something real and ask people to try to think about where they thought it would come from, or who the author was, or who the composer was. And it gets students thinking critically about the information that they have. Okay, and then finally, another common method is applying real skills to like a case study or to a service learning project, or even a fictional project or a fictional idea, but that is fun. And this could be, large and wide scale, like a semester-long project where students are working on, community engaged learning partner, working together on something. But it can also be something like a test question, or again, like just sort of a paragraph or an essay that somebody is writing, and just to think about it. So an example of that would be Paul Hansted from the book Creating Wicked Students proposed something like, argue for or against the feasibility of Pegasus from a biological perspective. And students will take the information that they have from class and then try to work back to a fictional problem. But it's another way to get people engaging more deeply with the information they have. Okay, so the Wicked Problems resources we will be posting. Another good resource if you're interested in doing more of this in your class is Creating Wicked Students. This is a book. I think there's a digital version at the USU library if you just want to flip through it on your computer. We also have some resources that are posted on the USU website. So it includes, we have now a number of faculty members who've gone through planetary thinking in the curriculum workshop. Some of the materials provided by those faculty are on the sustainability website. So if you're interested in seeing some of those things, additionally, some of the faculty who have participated have offered different types of experiences for other faculty who are interested in like consulting with them about what they've done in their classes, about taking tours on campus or inviting people for guest lectures. So those are other resources. Our website was updated just this week. So some of the links are broken, but hopefully we'll get those fixed soon. We had to move to the new university template and we're still working through some issues. So fair warning, but those are on the website and it will be available. Hopefully some of them now and all of them soon.
One of the things I want to add in real quickly. Sorry,
yeah.
As you're thinking about designing these things for your class and including these sort of activities for your class, one thing that I found is really helpful is making it as personal and immediate to students as possible. One of the exercises I do is when I teach business law, I also teach ethics, and we do an ethics exercise where I break the students up into different constituencies in Cache Valley. So there's like the farmers and the ranchers and USU and business people and homeowners and all the different groups. And then I task them with solving the problem of air quality in Cache Valley. And so they have to kind of solve this problem from their group's perspective and then deal with the ethical implications of what they're doing. And, are you just going to try and push it off and say it's somebody else's problem, or they need to do it first, or will your group be the one to take the hit? And so by making it more immediate and oftentimes by just looking out the window and seeing how important it is, it makes it much more effective for students whenever you're doing these sort of things.
Yeah, so we have like 2 minutes left. But if anybody has anything else they want to add to the discussion, or if you have any questions, we can do that now.
As you're thinking about your questions, and I'm sure you've got plenty, we do also want to let you know before we run out of time, we will be having our conference at the end of the semester. There will be incentives or reimbursements for people who, I think at this point, we're still working on that, for people who attend the conference, because we want to give you some resources to make sure you can implement the things you create. It's a very hands-on conference, and you build some curriculum pieces while we're in the conference, and we want you to be able to use those in your courses. And so we're trying to enable you to be able to do that. The other benefit is you also get ETE badges for attending. I don't think we've decided what all the badges are going to be or how many you get, but through the process of both coming to the conference and then the follow-ups after, you will get advancement towards your ETE goals with that. What did I forget, Alexi?
Oh, I'm going to jump in since we've got just 1 minute to wrap up. And so I'll reiterate that what John said. So we are adding, for those of you who weren't here at the beginning, we're adding a new track to ETE. Shelley has a talk later this afternoon about all the new things to ETE, and this is one of them. So along with digital age and evidence-based, there's now going to be a sustainability track. So that's what John's referring to. So keep an eye out for that. It's still in development, so there's not a ton of information, but it will be, we're rolling it out little by little. So this conference is one of the, I believe, is a required badge for that track. So we can continue our conversations on Mighty Networks. Alexi has promised to put it, that would be the spot to do it. Alexi is just right in that event for this page. So if you wanted to access those PowerPoints, we will keep Alexi accountable for doing that. And if you want to continue, there was a couple folks, somebody asked about case studies. You might drop that question as well in that Mighty Networks, and we'll pressure Alexi and John to go in there and answer those questions. And with that, we thank you so much, Alexi and John, for this presentation. And we'll take a quick break before jumping. The next sessions start at 10:15. So we'll see you all on Mighty Networks and maybe in the next sessions. And thanks so much.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.